All right, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're heading into some pretty dense territory. The mysterious world of cryptids. Those creatures that everyone's heard about but nobody can quite prove exist.
Right, right.
Today we're tackling the Sheepsquatch.
Oh, interesting.
It's West Virginia's own woolly nightmare. And we'll be using the Hunting Sheepsquatch book.
A cryptid hunter's handbook.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
It was published just this year, 2025, by the West Virginia Media Lab.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we'll use that to, guide our deep dive today.
Great.
We're going to try to unpack this whole legend, look at some reported sightings, maybe try to figure out why this Sheepsquatch, is so fascinating to people.
Yeah, the Sheepsquatch is a particularly interesting one because, well, I mean, unlike Bigfoot or Mothman, it's a pretty new cryptid.
Oh, so like the new kid on the block, cryptid-wise.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes you wonder, why now?
Right? Why is it suddenly so popular?
Well, if you look at the handbook, the name Sheepsquatch seems to have popped up in the 1990s. And that was right when all these sightings started being reported. So maybe the name itself kind of, got people's attention. It's catchy, right? Part sheep, part Sasquatch.
Yeah, I'm not sure catchy is the word I'd use. I gotta say, the name doesn't exactly scare me. When I hear Sheepsquatch, I don't picture some terrifying monster. More like, something kind of awkward, like a rejected Muppet or something.
Right. Well, most of the descriptions in the handbook, they describe this huge creature, like 7 to 9 feet tall, bulky, covered in this, thick matted fur.
Okay, so big and hairy.
Yeah, and usually it's like a dirty white or gray.
Oh, so not exactly a prize-winning fleece.
No, not at all. More like, it's been wallowing in the mud. And then there are the horns. People always mention those. Big curling horns like a ram. But I think the most striking detail has got to be the smell.
Oh, yeah. You can't forget the smell. The handbook mentions that a lot. It seems like almost every time somebody sees the Sheepsquatch, they smell it first. Like this awful, sulfurous, rotting stench.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if maybe that detail got added to the story later on, as people kept telling it.
Right, like a game of telephone.
Exactly. Each time, the description gets a little more exaggerated, a little more, stinky.
Yeah, that's how folklore works, right? It evolves, it gets passed down, and the most memorable details, the scary parts, well, they tend to stick around.
And speaking of scary, where exactly are these supposed Sheepsquatch encounters happening?
Well, the handbook says Boone County, West Virginia. Seems to be like the Sheepsquatch capital. That's where most people report seeing it.
Okay, Boone County, got it.
Yeah.
But why there? I mean, is there something special about Boone County?
Well, it's worth noting that the sightings aren't just in Boone County. There are reports from Kanawha and Nicholas counties too, and even over in Virginia.
Huh. So this thing gets around.
It does.
And I guess it makes sense that a place like Appalachia, with all those dense forests and mountains, it'd be a good place for a creature to hide out.
Right. Plenty of hiding spots.
And the handbook has some pretty intense stories about people running into the Sheepsquatch. Like, remember that one about the camper woke up in the middle of the night hearing footsteps around his tent?
Oh, yeah. And then he smelled that awful smell, the sulfur.
And then he sees these glowing eyes peering in at him.
Oops.
Totally freaked out. He runs out of there. And when he comes back the next day, his whole campsite is trashed.
Yeah. And then there's the one about the farmer who found his livestock all, messed up. Not just killed, but like played with.
Yeah, that one was gruesome.
While he was staking out his farm, he saw this big, hairy thing running off into the woods, so he figures it wasn't just some ordinary predator.
Right. Makes you wonder why we're so drawn to these stories, these specific kinds of stories, the ones about, being stalked in the dark.
It's primal, right, that fear.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, so we know the Sheepsquatch is supposed to be pretty terrifying, but what could it actually be?
Well, the handbook, it has a few ideas. One is that it's a brand new cryptid, a species we've never discovered before.
Okay, so like an Appalachian woolly mammoth.
Uh-huh, exactly, yeah. Something that's managed to avoid extinction all this time. Or maybe it's, a relative of Bigfoot, one that evolved differently in these mountains.
Mm. But if it's a new species, wouldn't we have found more evidence by now? Like footprints, fur, it's something more than just people saying they saw it.
That's a good point. The lack of physical evidence is a problem for that theory.
So maybe it's not a new creature at all. Maybe people are just, seeing things.
Right. The handbook mentions bears with mange. If you see one in bad lighting, it could look pretty strange.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Or maybe it's just some escaped farm animal that's gone wild, like a really big shaggy sheep or goat.
That's possible too. There are a lot of farms in Appalachia, so there are definitely animals around that could, if you saw them at the right or wrong moment, look pretty scary.
Right. And of course, we have to consider the possibility that it's a hoax. Maybe someone made the whole thing up as a joke.
Yeah. And then, thanks to the internet, the story just blew up.
It's amazing how fast things spread online.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell what's real and what's not sometimes.
Exactly.
And then there's the supernatural explanation.
Oh, right.
The handbook mentions that the sulfur smell makes some people think the Sheepsquatch is, well, demonic or like from another dimension.
Which I've always wondered, why would a demon choose to look like that?
Right. Like, if you were a demon, wouldn't you pick something a little more impressive?
It's a good question.
So many stories, so many details, and yet it's still a mystery.
Yeah. But the fact that people keep seeing something in those woods, something that matches the descriptions, it makes you think, what if there is something out there?
It definitely makes you think.
Yeah.
It's weird to think, even if it turns out the Sheepsquatch is just a bear with a bad hair day or some elaborate prank, it still says something about us.
Oh, definitely.
Like, why are we so fascinated by these creatures, these mysteries?
Well, cryptids, I think they tap into something deep in us, our relationship with nature, with the things we don't understand. They represent that fear of the unknown, the possibility that there's more out there than we know.
Right. And you mentioned earlier how the Sheepsquatch, well, how it kind of reflects Appalachia itself. I mean, it's this rugged, wild creature. And the stories, they always take place in these deep, dark woods.
Exactly. It's like this perfect embodiment of the wilderness, both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. And it reminds us, even now in this, high-tech world we live in, there are still places where mystery rules.
Yeah, I like that. It's not just a monster story. It's about our connection to those wild places.
Definitely.
And speaking of connections, have you thought about the economic side of all this?
Yeah.
Cryptids are big business. Look at Mothman, the Jersey Devil, Bigfoot. They all have festivals, museums, even guided tours.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine if the Sheepsquatch got that kind of attention. Like, what would they call it? Fleece Fest.
Right.
Yeah.
A whole celebration of wool.
You could have a stink trail hike. Follow the Sheepsquatch's scent through the woods.
There'd be a Sheepsquatch calling contest.
Oh, and don't forget the costume competition at the county fair.
Of course.
But seriously, though, it's interesting how these legends, whether they're real or not, they can actually bring people together, boost the local economy.
Yeah. It gives people a reason to visit, to share stories. It creates a sense of community.
And the story of the Sheepsquatch, it keeps evolving, right?
Yeah.
Every time somebody tells it, they add their own spin.
It's like this constantly changing narrative reflecting our own anxieties, the things we're thinking about as a culture. It shows how folklore really is alive.
So we've got this compelling legend, a creature that scares us and fascinates us at the same time. But what about the people who are actually out there looking for it?
The cryptid hunters.
The handbook talks about how they go about their investigations. And it seems like there are a few different approaches.
Yeah, you've got your more amateur enthusiasts, the ones who just grab their flashlights and their cameras and head into the woods, hoping to get lucky.
Yeah, those guys. I mean, it's kind of funny, but you got to admire their enthusiasm. It's like they're on a real adventure,
Oh, for sure. It's that classic explorer spirit. Then you have the researchers, the ones who are using more scientific methods, trail cameras, audio recorders, even trying to collect DNA samples.
Wow, getting high tech.
They're really trying to, apply rigorous methods to this very elusive subject.
Right. And then, of course, there are the TV shows, the Destination Truth and Finding Bigfoot type shows. Those are always entertaining.
They are fun to watch.
But let's be honest, they're more about the drama than the science.
Yeah, got to keep those ratings up.
Exactly. But it makes you wonder, why do people keep looking? I mean, what drives them to spend all this time and energy searching for something that might not even be real?
Well, for some, it's the thrill of the hunt, the excitement of the unknown. For others, it's a deeper desire, like wanting to find proof that the world is still full of wonder and magic.
So maybe it's not really about finding the Sheepsquatch. Maybe it's about the search itself.
Yeah, the journey, not the destination. And there's something to be said for that.
And what if, and this is just a thought, what if not finding the Sheepsquatch? What if that's actually part of its appeal?
You mean like the mystery is what keeps us interested?
Exactly. If we ever actually found it, if we knew for sure what it was, wouldn't that kind of ruin it?
It's like they say, the best stories are the ones we never finish telling. The mystery keeps us coming back for more.
the Sheepsquatch lets us live in that gray area, you know? We can believe, we can doubt. It's all part of the fun. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. You know, the Sheepsquatch legend, the sightings, the theories, the whole cultural impact. What really stands out to you from all this?
You know, for me, it's how closely tied the Sheepsquatch is to Appalachia. Like, it really embodies the whole spirit of the region. It's rugged, it's mysterious, it's connected to the wilderness. It reminds us that even today, with all our technology and everything, there are still places where mystery thrives.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's more than just a monster story, isn't it? It's about how we relate to nature, to the things we don't understand, to the things that scare us.
Exactly. It's about the stories we tell, how they shape our view of the world. Whether the Sheepsquatch is real or not, I mean, that might not even be the point. The real value is in those stories, in how they connect us to a place, to its history, and in the questions they make us ask about what we really know, you know?
It's almost like the Sheepsquatch is this kind of mirror reflecting our own, I don't know, anxieties,
I don't know,
fascination.
it's like a Rorschach test.
You
So
know.
the legend tells us as much about ourselves as it does about, the creature itself.
I like that. Okay, so before we wrap things up, got to ask you one last question. If you were going on a Sheepsquatch hunt, what's the one thing you wouldn't leave home without?
That's tough. Probably a good audio recorder, I think. Capture those sounds, the footsteps, the howls. That's what people always talk about, the sounds. If you get that on tape, that would be amazing.
Oh yeah, a good recorder. And maybe a nose clip, just in case.
Right. Can't forget about the smell.
Well, folks, that's about all the time we have for our Sheepsquatch deep dive. Hope you enjoyed the trip.
Yeah, and if you ever find yourselves in West Virginia, keep your eyes peeled. You never know what you might see out there.
Or smell.
Right.
Until next time, keep exploring. And remember, the best discoveries are sometimes the ones we never fully solve.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. The West Virginia Media Lab is all about celebrating our state and its people, businesses, stories, news, and folklore. If you love West Virginia like we do, be sure to comment below, then subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to stay connected. Until next time, stay wild, wonderful, West Virginia.